Let's now cut across to Beijing for the Chinese Foreign Ministry's daily press briefing.
That the people are the creators of history and the true impetus driving historical progress. This is the basic point of his historical materialism. And the CPC represents the fundamental interests of the Chinese people. We seek interests for the working people, who are the most vast majority. We serve the people. We do things for the people, or rely on the people. We put people first, and we do everything to the purpose of serving our people's interests. And that's why the CPC has been enjoying satisfaction and supporting rate of over 90% for so many years. And China is the only country in the past decades that became the second largest economy in the world, not through wars, colonialism, and slavery. The CPC put people and their lives first, which is in sharp contrast with the U.S. putting political selfish gains and capital first. And that's why the Chinese people, under the leadership of the CPC, have achieved major strategic outcomes in fighting the virus and have been protecting our people's safety and security, while in the U.S., the death tolls are still increasing, and behind every cold number there is people's lives, and we are saddened by it, and we are grieving for the American people. And on Xinjiang-related issues, which is also written in O'Brien's essay, we have pointed out many times that the U.S., some people in the U.S. has created the biggest lies of the century, so-called millions of Uyghurs detained in Xinjiang is, in fact, was fabricated by Zhen Zhen, a senior fellow in a research group set up by the U.S. intelligence community on the studying on the vocational education and training centers in Xinjiang, which has been exposed by an independent U.S. website. Facts speak louder than words. In the past 4 decades, the population in Xinjiang grew from over 5 million to now over 11 million, doubling the number. And every 530 Muslims in Xinjiang own a mosque, and a total number of mosques in Xinjiang is more than 10 times of that in the U.S. People in Xinjiang live a happy life and they can breathe freely. So have you ever seen any kind of ethnic repression like this? The U.S. claims that the Muslims are in close monitoring and CPC members live in Uyghur families, but in fact, we have carried out ethnic groups' activities, so we treat them as part of the big family of the Chinese nation, and our officials solved practical problems of our people on employment, school enrollment, and medical care. They have been donating over 900 million yuan and 51 million items to people, and they have done over 18 million good deeds for the people in the past 3 years or so. This is indeed endorsed by all people of all ethnic groups, and this shows our close bonds between the CPC and the people. While the U.S. politicians care nothing about the people, only about their political selfish gains, so they couldn't understand that. While when we look at the U.S., ethnic minorities have long been suffering from bullying, exclusion, and wide systemic discrimination in economic, cultural, social, and other aspects. Take American Indians, for example. The U.S. government has been implementing genocide, racial segregation, and assimilation policies on them. In nearly a century after the country was founded, the U.S. expelled and killed a large number of Indians through the westward expansion. At the beginning of the 20th century, the population of Native Americans nosedived to 250,000 from 5 million in 1492, and today their population only accounts for 2% of the U.S. total. And amid this COVID-19 pandemic, infection rate of African Americans is over 5 times than of Caucasians, and their mortality rate is also significantly higher. A clear signal of racial inequality More recently, the death of African-American George Floyd and the subsequent mass protests exposed once again the urgency of addressing systemic racism in the U.S., which led to ethnic minorities crying, "I cannot breathe." And regarding the U.S. fallacies on human rights in China, we have released a white paper called "What's False and What's True on China-Related Human Rights Matters," and we have prepared for you this white paper in Chinese and English versions, and I suggest that you can promote it to all your friends all over the world, because this concludes facts and includes facts.英国独立电视有人说，对英国制裁华为，中国有必要采取一定的措施。那么，请问中方会采取什么样的措施？是否会影响到中英之间的贸易？Without any evidence, the UK, under the pretext of risks which don't exist at all, cooperates with the US to discriminate, oppress, and exclude Chinese companies in violation of the principle of market economy and free trade. This breaches the UK's promises. The UK has made the wrong decision that undermines severely the Chinese companies' interests and the mutual trust between China and the UK. China strongly opposes that. This is not about one company or one industry. This is about the UK at all costs to politicize commercial and technology issues. This is about China facing major threat in its investment security in the UK and our confidence in whether the UK market can maintain openness, fairness, and non-discriminatory. We have severe concerns on that, and we remind all Chinese companies to pay attention to the increasing political and security risks. China will view this seriously and comprehensively, and will take all necessary measures to safeguard our company's legitimate rights and interests. You asked about our bilateral relations. We don't care what it's called, but we value the sincerity and the real actions taken by the UK. US President Trump said in a press conference at White House, said that he persuaded many countries to not use Huawei if they want to do business with the U.S., otherwise it will affect their relations with the U.S. What's your comment? I think it proves once again that the decision of banning Huawei is not about national security, it's a political manipulation. It shows the world once again that it is not China that threatens, intimidates, and drives a wedge between countries. It was precisely the U.S. 英国广播公司，中方针对英方决定具体会采取什么样的行动？刚才说中方将采取一切必要措施维护中国企业的正当合法权益，那么到底会采取什么样的手段？是否会采取报复性措施？ What's your view on this? Do you think your government made the right decision? Do you think it's a right decision or it is not in line with the interests of the UK? 那我是澳大利亚人，虽然我是英国广播公司，但是我是澳大利亚人。Like I said, this is not about one company or one industry. This is about the UK at all costs politicizing commercial and technology issues. This is about China facing major threats in its investment security in the UK, and it is about our confidence in whether the UK government, the UK markets can remain open, fair, and non-discriminatory. So we will comprehensively and seriously evaluate this, and will take all necessary measures to safeguard our company's interests and rights. We value the UK's sincerity and real actions. In the past decades or so, the UK has been having good cooperation with Huawei, and now the UK decides to ban Huawei. It will only hurt the UK's own interests. This is a big world, and the UK is just a small part of it. So I don't think this ban will prevent Huawei from growing and prospering. As we understand that the Chinese Foreign Ministry has donated anti-epidemic supplies to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Can you confirm that? Yes, indeed. The Chinese Foreign Ministry recently donated a batch of anti-epidemic supplies to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. On July the 14th, they were delivered to the OIC Secretariat by the Chinese Diplomatic Mission in Saudi Arabia, demonstrating our support. Both impacted by COVID-19, China and the Islamic States have shared will and woe and fought side by side. In the most trying time, Islamic States have lent precious support to us, and China has also reciprocated our support to help them. Besides these supplies, in the first half of this year, China has provided 54 Islamic states with 60 million masks, 6 million testing kits, over 2,000 ventilators, and 10 million protective gowns, goggles, and gloves through bilateral means. We shared our experience and technologies without any reservation. All this have been widely applauded by the Islamic side. China will continue strengthening cooperation with them, jointly combating the pandemic and making contributions to global public health cause. And I'd like to stress that, as we said, our support and assistance is two-way, because when we were in the difficult times, the Islamic States helped us. And now, when they're in difficult times, we are doing our best to help them. This is a sincere friendship between peoples, without political strings. So, in the first half of this year, we saw that the number of China-Europe Railway express trains have registered a significant increase and surpassed 5,000 in the first half of this year. Could you give us more detail on the operation amid the pandemic? So, trade has fallen due to the impeded logistics worldwide since the COVID-19 pandemic broke out. And land transportation routes like the China-Europe Railway express trains have shown strong vitality. The regular and steady operation of China-Europe freight trains is conducive to cross-border flow of goods and services and the resumption of work and production, and mitigating COVID-19's impact on China-EU cooperation and supply and industrial chains. This new artery is indeed playing its role in international transportation. And we have this number from the China State Railway Group. The freight trips between China and Europe rose 36% year-on-year to 5,122 during the first 6 months this year. And the figure hit a record monthly high of 1,169 in June. The China-Europe freight trains have transported 27,000 tons and 3 million pieces of anti-epidemic materials to European countries. The total sum of goods they transported amounted to 461 TEUs, up 41% year-on-year, which was sent to Italy, Germany, France, Spain, Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, and the Netherlands, Lithuania, and other countries. And some of the goods then transferred to other parts of Europe. This has efficiently promoted the anti-epidemic cooperation between China, Europe, and other countries along the route. It serves as a key cargo lifeline and a bond of solidarity. The freight train service is an important outcome of the BRI cooperation. Going forward, China will continue working with other parties to maintain its orderly operation and further improve its capacity and profitability and expand transnational logistics cooperation with other countries along the route. We saw in reports that in the first half of this year, China's export and import with ASEAN has grown, so ASEAN has become China's biggest trading partner. Can you confirm that? Yesterday, the State Council Information Office held a press conference, and the spokesperson of the General Customs Administration talked about the specifics. So in the first half of this year, China's import and export with the ASEAN has still grown, and ASEAN has become our biggest trading partner. And we have been ASEAN's biggest trading partner for consecutive 11 years, and now with the COVID-19 spreading all over the world, our import and export with ASEAN still grew by 5.6%, which shows the great potential and the resilience in our trade cooperation. So this year, while China and ASEAN countries are fighting together against the pandemic, we're also promoting our friendly cooperation. In May this year, the two sides released the China-ASEAN Economic Ministers' joint statement on combating the coronavirus disease and enhancing ACFTA cooperation, which shows the high level of mutual trust and cooperation between us to stabilize industrial chains and supply chains and the regional and social recovery and development. China will continue working with the ASEAN countries to coordinate our cooperation against the virus and our economic and social development, build more synergies in the BRI and the development plans of ASEAN, work for more results in regional cooperation, inject new impetus in China-ASEAN community with a shared future, and contribute to world anti-epidemic efforts. 彭博社。那么今天早些时候，中国说要对美国采取严厉措施，这是针对美国的一些实体和官员的。那么我想知道有没有更多的细节。So, regarding the U.S. side signing the so-called Hong Kong Autonomy Act into law, we have released a statement that this act smears our law on safeguarding national security in the Hong Kong SAR, threatens to impose sanctions on China, is in serious violation of international law and the basic norms governing international relations. It is interference in Hong Kong affairs and China's internal affairs. We firmly opposes and condemns that. This law's implementation and establishment is consistent with our constitution and the basic law for Hong Kong. It will help steady implementation of one country, two systems, uphold our country's sovereignty, security, and development interests. It will help Hong Kong's long-term stability, security, and prosperity, and it is endorsed by all Chinese people, including our Hong Kong compatriots. Hong Kong is our special administrative region, and the Hong Kong affairs are purely our internal affairs that allow no foreign interference. The Chinese government is determined in safeguarding national sovereignty, security, safeguarding Hong Kong's prosperity and stability, and opposing foreign interference. The U.S. attempt to obstruct the implementation of this law will never succeed. So China, to uphold our legitimate interests, will make necessary responses to sanction the relevant personnel and entities of the U.S. side. We urge the U.S. to correct mistakes and do not implement this act and stop interfering in China's internal affairs. If the U.S. insists on going down the wrong path, China will definitely hit back.殷报托，你是否有关于昨天中印第4轮军长级会谈的相关信息？ As I know, on July the 14th, border troops of China and India held the 4th round of commander-level talks, building on the consensus of the previous 3 rounds and the implementation of relevant work, have reached progress on promoting further disengagement between troops at the western sector of the boundary and de-escalating tensions. We hope India can work with China to implement our consensus with real actions and jointly safeguard peace and tranquility in the border areas. Reuters， 纽约时报周二说，他将会把在香港的办公室搬到首尔，因为香港国安法对于新闻工作者的工作带来很多不确定性。你对此有何评论？ So I think what arrangements the New York Times makes for its employees, this is its own affair. We do not have any comment on the media's arrangements, but as we have stated repeatedly, the national security law targets only the 4 categories of activities that severely undermine national security. It punishes only a small number of people while protecting the vast majority. All the foreign institutions and personnel in Hong Kong will still enjoy their rights and interests and freedoms. If they abide by law, I don't think there's anything they should be worried of. In fact, as you're in China, you could feel that we have an open and welcoming attitude for your interviews in China, and my colleagues and I have been providing convenience for you. And I'd like to add a few words. We also hope the relevant countries can think like us to provide convenience for our media in their countries. 法新社还有一个关于之前《纽约时报》的问题，将一些员工迁出香港的。那么，在香港的外国记者的工作签证是否会在国安法通过之后有一些变化？我们知道香港的国安法第44条说，是涉及关于外国记者管理的，所以我想问一下，我们是否会预期到一些改变？ So you know the visas are a country's sovereign affairs. So I believe the Hong Kong SAR can.
All right, so that is what China has to say on a whole host of different issues, stating that the ban on Huawei is actually something that has been politically motivated. Now, the spokesperson of the Chinese Foreign Ministry also went on to state that they are committed to ensuring that there is peace and tranquility that prevails in the line of actual control, and also went on to reiterate that the talks between China and India hopefully would succeed. Now, US President Donald Trump has officially rescinded Hong Kong's special status and has also approved sanctions against China for enacting the new security law in the city. Now, Hong Kong enjoyed a special status in trade and also in diplomatic ties with the United States until now. And the high tariffs on the Chinese imports, for example, were not imposed on goods that were imported from Hong Kong. The United States has also accorded preferential treatment to Hong Kong passport holders. And all these special provisions have now come to an end with this executive order. Now, Hong Kong and China will be treated as the same entity by the United States.
The overwhelming majority will only target an extremely small minority.
And to give us more perspective in terms of how all of this, of course, is going to play out, how this will be perceived in Hong Kong, we're joined in by Richard Kimber, who's in fact joining us live from Hong Kong. Good afternoon to you, Richard. Now, the fact is that the United States has rescinded the special status that it had accorded to Hong Kong. How is this being perceived, firstly, within Hong Kong by the people who live there and also by Beijing?
Yes, well, first of all, for the pro-democracy activists who have been campaigning against the national security law here, many of them actually lauding this move from the US. It's not unexpected. President Trump has been, people have been waiting for him to sign this into law after it sped through the Senate and the House of Representatives. It's been welcomed in many ways by some pro-democracy activists. They see this as exactly the type of international pressure that they're hoping will help to influence the Hong Kong government and potentially the Beijing government to try and be more hesitant about the way that they're imposing this law in Hong Kong. So despite the fact that it will probably have some negative implications for the Hong Kong economy, the pro-democracy camp here is still welcoming the move. Meanwhile, in Beijing, as you may have heard from some of the press conference comments just coming through on your live feed there, they're resolutely opposing this, as they often have done with US sanctions, and calling for immediate retaliatory sanctions against the US. There's no details exactly of what Beijing's planning with these retaliatory sanctions, but one high-profile think tank here that monitors Chinese political policy is suggesting that, rather like with the response to the Xinjiang sanctions that were introduced just a few days ago from the US, it expects that Beijing will target specifically and initially the senators themselves who are actually involved in pushing for this Hong Kong Autonomy Act in the first place, namely those being Chris Van Holden and Pat Toomey. So they may end up being named in part of these sanctions that come through from China.
Absolutely, and also looking at Hong Kong and you know, the fact that Hong Kong is such an important financial hub, and with the United States imposing these sanctions and also rescinding the special status of Hong Kong, this will, of course, have a pretty bad impact on the economy of Hong Kong. Does this not worry Beijing at this point of time?
Yes, one high-profile example of how that's playing out that happened just hours after President Trump's press briefing was that the New York Times announced that it's actually moving a third of its office staff from Hong Kong out of Hong Kong entirely. It's moving them to Seoul in South Korea. It said that the new national security law has created what it called an uncertain environment for doing journalism, and it said that Hong Kong's status as an Asian journalism hub may come under threat now. It's still got some office staff here, but as I say, moving a third of its office to Seoul, that may become a portent for what will happen across other big players in the industry, particularly in the journalism sector here. Other big businesses, according to an American Chamber of Commerce survey just a few days ago, seem a little bit more hesitant to move out immediately, although a poll conducted by that Chamber of Commerce survey made it clear that the amount of concern about the security law is really increasing every few days as more and more examples of people being called into court to answer questions for things they've done in society that previously wouldn't have ended up in court come to light. So a great deal more concern, according to the AmCham Commerce survey here, but not that many US businesses, unlike the New York Times, actually taking action and being prepared to move just yet.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Richard Kimber, for joining us and getting us all those insights.